Hello and good afternoon, CSI257 Section 847 students for the first 8-week term for the spring 2015 semester at Anne Arundel Community College. This is the Scaling Networks course, and today's video tutorial is going to be on PacketTracer activity 8.1.3.4, where we're going to learn how to propagate a default route for both IPv4 and IPv6. So let's go ahead and jump in here. You can see we've got our addressing table, and the scenario is simply going to be we're going to configure that default route, right? So let's jump in here. And this is actually very straightforward. We're going to verify the EIGRP configuration on each IPv4 enabled router. So let's take a look at branch 2 and branch 1 here and the IPv4 edge. Let's pull these guys up. And we're going to give us a little more real estate to work with here. And let's pull branch 1 up. And let's readjust this here. There we go. So we'll pull branch 1 up. And enlarge it a little. And pull up IPv4 edge. Alright, so let's take a look at the IPv4 edge first, and let's see what the routing table looks like here. So we're going to go from user exec to privilege exec, and we're going to type in show IP route. So as you can see, the gateway of last resort is not set yet on the IPv4 edge router. Let's check branch 1 and branch 2 to see, do they have, and hopefully that is not going to continue like that, hopefully they have. We'll go from user exec to privilege exec, and I'm going to say show IP route. And again, the gateway of last resort is not set for branch 1. How about branch 2? And we'll say show IP route. And the gateway of last resort is not set either. So we're going to configure a directly connected IPv4 default route on IPv4 edge. So let's go ahead and take a look at the show IP interface brief. Since this is going to be directly connected, we know that we're not going to be going to an internal address here because this goes out to the internet, and these are RFC 1918 addresses here. Remember, these are private address space addresses, so therefore these are not going to be seen on the internet. We're going to be looking at this 209.165.200.226 out serial 010. So let's go ahead and configure a default route. So remember, with OSPF, we had the static route configured, and then what we would say under the OSPF router global config area is default information originate, and then that router would push out the default route information. It's a very similar process here. So on the IPv4 edge, let's go ahead and let's get that directly connected default route set up. So we're going to go to global config mode. I'm going to say IP route, and it's going to be the quad 0, 0.0.0.0, 0.0.0.0, and then directly connected. So I'm going to say serial 010. Now again, that's that very common message that we see telling us that a default route without gateway, if not a point-to-point interface, may impact performance, because if this was going out to a multi-access segment, not a point-to-point link segment, we would end up with an increased amount of ARP traffic because we would have to figure out what is our next hop going to be, right? And specifically the next hop IP, where are we going to be going? So we've got our default gateway configured. So now if I say do show IP route, we can see that the gateway of last resort is now set, right? And how do we see the static route? It's with the capital S and the asterisks. Asterisk means that it is a candidate default route. And so here it is, and it's going to be directly connected out serial 010. So now the question becomes, how do we propagate this default route via EIGRP? Well, again, it's very, very similar to OSPF. If I were to say do show run, And let's confirm our EIGRP configuration here. It's just simply router EIGRP1. So I'm going to say router EIGRP1, and we are going to redistribute static because that is a static default route. So again, remember on branch 2 and branch 1, where it says gateway of last resort is not set, let's go ahead and hit enter here and come back over to branch, we'll start with branch 1. And now we're simply going to say show IP route, and let's see if it looks any different. It certainly does. So EIGRP has now propagated the default routing information from our IPv4 edge router over to branch 1 into branch 2. So branch 1 sees it, and this is very, very important. So this is a redistributed EIGRP route, and since it is redistributed, it is going to come in and be learned as an external EIGRP prefix. Remember, if it has a D, just the D by itself, that means it's an internal EIGRP prefix. It's in the same autonomous system. We've redistributed the route, right? And if it's redistributed, EIGRP treats it as an external entity. So what are the differences? Well, the first difference is that you see an EX instead of a D by itself. The second major difference is the administrative distance of an external EIGRP route, and that administrative distance is 170, right? It's no longer 90. 90 is for internal EIGRP routes. For external EIGRP routes, it's 170. And then finally, we have the asterisk again, right? So I'm learning this route from EIGRP. It is a candidate default route, and it's an external EIGRP route. But we now have a default route. Let's see what branch 2 is reporting now. If I do a show IP route here, he's reporting the same thing. He has learned an external EIGRP source that is a candidate default route, and his next hop, the successor for that route, is 172.31.7.1 out interface serial 001. And that is going to be his neighbor here, the IPv4 edge. So if I were to say show IP EIGRP neighbors, that is his only neighbor out the local interface serial 001 is 172.31.7.1, right? Okay, so branch 2 has picked up that default route. So let's go ahead and take a look here, and part 2 is going to have us work over on the right-hand side of the equation. So we're going to take a look at branch 3, and this is going to be done with IPv6. And we'll pull the CLI up here. We'll get a little more real estate. We'll take a look at the IPv6 edge. And then finally, we'll pull up branch 4. All right, so we have all 3 routers now up and available here on the right-hand side of our diagram, which is the IPv6 side of the diagram. So you'll be happy to know there's no summary configuration work that we're going to be doing here. So we're just going to be configuring the default route for IPv6, and we're going to redistribute that route into the IPv6, the EIGRP for IPv6 autonomous system. So we are going to go ahead and say step number 2, well, we can display the routing tables. Let's take a look at the routing tables here on IPv6 edge. So we'll say enable to get to privilege exec mode. I'll say show IPv6 route. So that's what our routing table looks like now. You can see there is no default or candidate default in here. Let's take a look over at branch 3. So we'll get into privilege exec. I'll say show IPv6 route. And again, we have no default route listed here. Let's take a look at branch 4. So we'll say enable to go to privilege exec, show IPv6 route. And as you would expect, no default route here. So let's go ahead and set that up on the IPv6 edge. So step 2 says configure a directly connected IPv6 default route on IPv6 edge. So let's say show IPv6 interface brief. And what is our connection, or who is our connection? who is the interface we're connected out to the internet with, and that's going to be the 2001 DB8 Cafe. As you can see, these are global unicast addresses. However, we know that these are from branch 3 and branch 4. This is out to our internet connection. And what you could do to confirm this, as again, this is a little different than looking at the you can see that they're both global unicast addresses. We've got our link locals, but it's a little more difficult looking at these and then easily discerning, oh, you're going to see that on the internet, or no, you wouldn't see that on the internet. So let's type in config T to get to global config mode. Let's go ahead and go into interface serial 010, and an easy way to check is to say shut. And you can see that that link is now down. So when I say no shut, the link now comes back up and it's green. So we know 100% right now that the serial 010 interface is going to be our directly connected next hop for our default route. So now we're dealing with IPv6 here. So I'm going to get out of the interface mode here. I'm going to say IPv6 route. Now we use the quad zeros in IPv4, but how do we represent what the quad zeros signify in IPv4? How do we do that in IPv6? Well, it's actually rather simple, and it's very nice shorthand. It's just : /0. That's it. So you don't have to type 8 zeros and 8 periods. It's just : /0. And now we're going to give the the outgoing interface, serial 010, and that is it. That is our default route. So if I now say do show IPv6 route, do we have a default route? We certainly do. And you'll notice what's the one thing that's missing here that we saw over on the left-hand side when we had a default route or a candidate default route. Exactly, the asterisk. The asterisk isn't here. So remember, you're not going to see the asterisk in IPv6, and we'll confirm that over on branch 3 and branch 4. So now that we've configured our static default route out to the internet, now we want to propagate this information out to the rest of the routers. And let me say do show run. Let's make sure it's EIGRP1. Our autonomous system number is EIGRP1. So what we're going to say now is router, or I apologize, we're going to say IPv6, still stuck in IPv4 there, IPv6 router EIGRP, and then simply the autonomous system number, which is 1. And then we're going to use the exact same command. It's just redistribute static. So before I do that, remember we saw no default routes over here on 3 or 4. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter on the edge router. Now let's come over to router 3 and type in show IPv6 route. And what do we see? We see an external EIGRP route, which is a default route to : /0. The administrative distance, because it's an external EIGRP route, is going to be 170. And you'll notice it doesn't say D space EX or D asterisk EX. It just simply says EX. And if you look at the table above, you can see here where if it's external, it's just simply going to say EX. It's not going to have the D in there with it, where over on the branch we've got the DEX as well, and it shows them both on the same line, DEX. It does not over on the IPv6 side. It simply shows the EX. So let's take a look at branch 4 and let's see if we successfully picked up our default route, and we did. And here it is. And so for connectivity, how are we going to test our connectivity? So it's asking us to take a look at PC 1 and 2 on the IPv4 side and 3 and 4 on the IPv6 side. So I'll pull up PC 1 and let's go to the command prompt. So we're going to ping 64.100.1.10. Chances are we're going to have to ARP for our default gateway here. And so we're probably going to miss our first ping. We do, but then we've got success. Let's make sure PC2 can get out and get over to that host. Pull up the command prompt. I'm going to say ping 64.100.1.10. And he hits it immediately. So we've got connectivity on the IPv4 side. Let's pull up our PC's PC3. And let me try to go ahead and ping, what are we doing? 2001 DB8 colon cafe colon 1 colon 3. And check the name. And if I'm not mistaken, is it, that should work. Did I type something in wrong there? Let me see. Yeah, that should have worked. But it doesn't like that IP address. Make sure, is it, oh, let me make sure it's not ping 6. 2001 colon DB8. It shouldn't be. Let me make sure colon 1 colon. Oh, did I put colon 3? Did I not get that right? Invalid command. Yeah, so it should be ping 2001 colon DB8 colon cafe colon 1 colon 3. There we go. And let me go back and look. What did I do a single colon? Not sure why I missed that there. Ah, single colon. I apologize. So it's definitely colon 3. And then we'll check from PC4. And let's make sure that PC4 has full connectivity. So I'm going to say ping 2001 colon DB8 colon cafe colon 1 colon 3. And we've got connectivity. Yeah, had I stuck with that 192 train of thought there, the colon would have been the least of my concerns. Okay, so that concludes it. And again, as you can see here, we've maxed our score out. We've got 100 out of 100. So again, we've taken a look at how to configure default routes on our edge routers, and then how to propagate those default routes into the EIGRP autonomous system. And again, you'll notice that the routes show up as external EIGRP routes, which means they're going to have a cost of an administrative distance of 170. And the differences between IPv4 and IPv6, we saw that the asterisk, which indicates that it's a candidate default route, is no longer there with IPv6. That we simply see the external route with the :/0. All right, well, that concludes the tutorial for PacketTracer Activity 8.1.3.4, and hopefully you now have a better understanding as to how to create the default route, and more importantly, how to then propagate that default route into your EIGRP, whether it's EIGRP for IPv4 or your EIGRP for IPv6 autonomous system. All right, thanks for watching and have a great evening.